Welcome back, Be Good community. Today, we're going to be talking about clear vision in leadership. Last week, I talked about the importance of clarity and clear communication when it came to teaching in the classroom. And that same practice, and that's the importance of it, is maybe even more manifest in leadership, or its absence is actually even more felt throughout a school community. And we talk about vision and we talk about clarity of vision, but what does it actually mean? Well, a school's success sort of hinges on clarity and alignment of, vision and values. When speaking with people in the armed forces who have moved from military life to the civilian sector, so often there are comments about a lack of leadership training in the civilian world. And okay, I think about that and I say, well, what do you mean by that? And they say, well, when you get into the civilian world, there is they say a lack of ownership. And the way that they say that the lack of ownership manifests itself so often is that leadership doesn't give you clarity on what's actually important. Because when we don't provide a clear vision, the people we're leading don't really know what are the most important and essential things in their job. And when they don't know what the most important essential things of their job are, and we haven't provided a clear vision, we also don't have a way in which they can hold us accountable or to know what to expect from us in terms of how we're going to be supporting. Because the vision drives, and that alignment should drive all of our behaviors. It should drive what we do as school leaders. And when those things are aligned, when we as school leaders also are aligned with a vision that we have made very clear to teachers, they also trust us. They start to understand why we're taking some of the actions and the steps that we're taking. So I want to talk about that when teachers understand, so some of the importance of clear vision, first and foremost, is that when teachers understand not just the what and the why, it's also explaining, here's the what, and this is why we're going about it. When they understand why they're working towards those goals, it makes all the difference in the world. Because a clear vision gives them a sense of sort of purpose, but it also allows them to help you out. And so I'm going to talk about that going forward. And so much of getting buy-in is in the process. So ideally, the goal can also, when we talk about the goal, we talk about what our organization most needs or our school most needs. Ideally, teachers have had some kind of voice in that process, and therefore, and that will also help with moving forward. But I want to talk about some of the action steps to take to be clear about your vision, because there are so many things that come up in a school on a day-to-day basis. A teacher is expected to do so many things. People think that what teachers are doing is just teaching. But man, they are supporting kids emotionally. They are doing paperwork that they don't always know exactly why it's very important. They are trying to communicate with parents. They're trying to navigate whatever expectations their bosses have. And sometimes they have multiple bosses, right? They're trying to also work with colleagues and collaborate. They're trying to make sure that students are emotionally safe. They're trying to enforce consequences for behavior. All these kind of things. Teachers are making so many different decisions over the course of the day. A lack of clarity from their leadership or the why and the what of what is most important at that school will kill morale, and it's just another thing that teachers will feel like they have to deal with and creates an unsafe environment. So how do we do it though? So with all these things going on, what do we do? Well, there's an importance of ongoing communication. An example was given to me in university where I took a cultural anthropology class, and the professor had lived with multiple groups of hunter-gatherer tribes for years at a time. And what he had noted, I remember in class, it wasn't a leadership class, but it always stayed with me, is he had noted that those who stayed chief for the longest and had tribes that were happiest with them, he noticed that one of the consistent things they had to do was they were communicating all the time. They were moving around, talking to different people in the tribe on a consistent basis. They said they almost never stopped communicating with folks. And what's the importance of this? Well, communication is not a one-time effort, right? There needs to be a consistent, ongoing process. The best leaders, the best principals, make communication a priority, and they're constantly keeping teachers informed about shifts in policy, new initiatives, or any changes that might impact the classroom. So anything that teachers are going to have to deal with, that teachers are going to have to implement, there's a consistent communication. There's no surprises. Even if we're thinking about something down the line, I've told people before when I've worked with them that there was never a new initiative rolled out to teachers at the beginning of a year, beginning of the school year. They knew the year in advance. We started talking about, we're thinking about this. We're thinking about doing this for the next year. And we were getting input and informing and talking about why we were doing that. And we were sharing the data about why we were thinking about doing this. So the teachers knew what we were thinking about, and they knew why we were thinking about doing it. But they also had a year to adjust or give us feedback, because sometimes we adjusted based on that. But it's that consistent communication even beforehand and then after. Because there is a role that transparency plays. When we are transparent, and people use this term all the time, I want to be transparent, I want to be transparent. Transparent communication is consistent communication. You're not transparent if you're not talking consistently. If you only presented your idea and you communicated once in an email at the beginning of the year, and even if you put a whole bunch of links in there, that's not consistent communication, that's not transparent communication. Whether it's about policy changes or new programs, people feel more safe and more informed and more included and respected if the communication is consistent, right? It fosters sort of an environment of this trust. When teachers know that they are going to be partners in any process, they're also more likely to get buy-in. And I've talked about this before in some of my audios and everything else. But I try to emphasize to young administrators and just people in general that buy-in is more about the process than it is after the fact. The after the fact trying to get buy-in is much weaker than making sure there is a process of communication that's consistent and transparent and feedback going back and forth before you ever implement something. And then after, because you want to be open to adjustments. You want to be open to getting information in real time that makes your decisions better and actually makes you not only a better communicator, but also increases the intelligence of the whole school community. So the next thing I want to talk about, number 2, is we have to align the vision with daily practices. So I want to talk about a school that I was at. They were introduced a civility code because they thought that it was very important coming out of COVID that civility, basically manners almost, right? How we communicated with each other from student to student, student to teacher, teacher to teacher, administrator to teacher, and vice versa. That was very important for building the culture and shaping a culture that everybody wanted to be in, a psychologically safe environment, but also one in which people felt respected and included, felt belonging. But where things began to break down is when parts of the civility code were not being followed by the adults. The civility code became, well, we expect it out of students, but I'm an adult, or I'm a school leader, or I can't do that all the time. If you have a vision for something that the school should be practicing, the school leadership has to show that it doesn't just stay in the principal's office, right? It needs to be woven into the fabric of the school. It needs to be part of the expectation of how we communicate and take action steps together. When teachers see how their work fits into the bigger picture, when we make daily practices or make routines that emphasize the vision, then they feel more confident about the direction of the school. They don't have to ask as many questions because there's been clarity about what we're doing. And when our daily actions as administrators are consistent with that, they also start to feel this accountability and responsible that, hey, if the school leader is aligning their daily actions so that they are modeling, they are moving in that direction of our greater vision, then I need to be doing that too. And they don't mind being held accountable on that if leadership is also accountable for that. And that is part of this reciprocal relationship that starts to happen when the leadership, its daily practices, are emphasizing and practicing in accordance with that vision for the school. The accountability begins to go to drive down, in that the school leadership is doing it, the teachers begin to do it for themselves, and then students begin to also. It's all connected, right? Not one part of the school is completely separated from the other. People who think that a toxic environment among teachers doesn't bleed into the students, or a toxic environment amongst leadership doesn't bleed into the teachers, they're a little bit naive in terms of that. So an action step to take here is to make sure that the vision is aligned to your daily practices, right? You make sure that the goals or the values that you articulate at your school are reflective of the day-to-day work in the school. So it's worth it having this conversation with your teachers or even amongst your leadership team. If we say we value respect, we say we value integrity, how do we show that? What are the behaviors that someone wouldn't need to look on our wall or look on a sign to know that we value those things? How are you showing it? How would a new teacher be able to come in and just see that school leadership values respect without having to be told? That's what you're looking for. Your behaviors and making sure those align. And teachers the same way, students the same way. Everyone needs to be thinking about, well, how are the behaviors? What are the behaviors that would show this? Not to be just words. Action step number 3. Foster ownership. When the entire staff is on the same page, it builds trust, right? You're going to get more engagement. And teachers feel empowered to take ownership of their responsibility in it. And this is where we have to do something, and it's hard for teachers, and it's hard for administrators in schools oftentimes to not begin to micromanage, because we start to think that we need to do that sometimes. When we have a vision, we really want it to, this to turn out well. We think that, especially when we start to get passionate about something, we start to think that we need to be involved in every little bit of the process, where the power of this is, if we set a clear vision of what we want to achieve and the goals we want to achieve, let your people take some ownership of the process. That's where the autonomy is. We have to agree on where we're going. We have to agree on the end game. And we have to get clear on that. We have to be reminded about that. But we can allow for autonomy, and we can allow for empowerment. We can allow for ownership in the process to get there, because every person can bring their personality, can bring their skills and their strengths to the fore to make this something that we all feel good about. We can be consistent and clear about what a vision is and not lose autonomy. I want to give an example. There are so many different types of basketball coaches, right? They have so many different approaches. And that's allowed. We're okay with that because we all know what a basketball coach is preparing for. The assessment or the vision is very clear. They want to win basketball games. The more clear your assessment is in a classroom, the more clear what we're trying to learn or what we're trying to accomplish is in an organization, the more confident you can be in allowing people to have some autonomy, in allowing people to say, that's where we're going, and this is how I'm trying to achieve that in my classroom. Or here's some ideas we have that maybe could help us in an after-school activity or in this field with student council or what have you. So when we make sure your teachers feel that they are contributors, that their contributions are valued, that what they're bringing to the table is important, that they have a real stake in the mission. In order to do that, though, you have to allow them to have some autonomy. You have to allow them to have some say in the process. This is very important. And that, of course, is facilitated, and that trust is garnered by consistent communication, by consistent two-way communication, by leadership consistently communicating, reminding, talking about what the vision is, consistently checking in multiple times throughout the year. How is it going? Getting some feedback, checking for understanding, but also checking to see what needs to be retaught, checking to see what supports do we need that I didn't know about before. This is checking for understanding and being open to that feedback so that we can course correct and get better. So important to creating an environment that's psychologically safe, but also dynamic and supporting student learning and teacher growth along the way. So, the clearer you are, the takeaway is, the clearer you are about your vision, the more empowered your team will be. And when your team is empowered, when they feel that they have ownership and they have a stake in it, the entire school will thrive. It happens almost by itself, just by focusing in on clarity. Clarity and respect, those two things. They create a school environment that takes it to the next level. And you don't even have to get that involved in pedagogy. Just those two things, clarity and respect. So as a leader, it's our job to make sure that the vision isn't just a statement on paper, that it's something that we live, that we breathe, that we talk about, that becomes a part of the school culture. And people can see it in our behaviors every day. Try it out. Be good.